I have a real fear in this country right now that Kirk's death and the fallout from it has the potential to do to America what John Brown's raid did to America in 1859. I really fear that might happen.
America is divided because our powerful federal government pits red states against blue. We need to return power to the states and to the people by decentralizing. If that fails, we must be prepared for a peaceful national divorce or face a destructive civil war. Welcome to War, Divorce, or Federalism. America at a crossroads.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to our very first episode of a new format that we are introducing into the Secession Speakeasy rotation. This is Secession Speakeasy, the Tavern Roundtable, where we bring people on and we just put forward a question and we discuss it and go from there. And as always, we talk about the forbidden topics: secession, nullification, electoral integrity, balanced representation, self-governance, free will. Anything that the elites say, you don't want to talk about that. Well, we talk about that here. And that's it. But as always, even though this is a speakeasy of talk rather than drink, we have drinks to enjoy, and we're going to go around the table here, just see what everybody is down tonight. So let's start with Jason. We'll go to Rick, and then I'll top it off. So
got a little cranberry something here.
Cranberry something, I like it.
What it is? I got
Bourbon. It's Michter's Toasted Barrel.
that sounds good.
Ooh, very nice.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Almost went with the Sazerac rye, but I just stuck with the cranberry.
Well, I'm the most boring of the lot here. I've got just regular water on the rocks, so it's just regular ice water. So, but that's just me. I think it's a little late for me to be drinking at this point.
It's 5 o'clock somewhere. Wait, does that go backwards, or is that?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think I'd have to go to Hawaii to get 5 o'clock. But
Fair.
All right, well, let's kick this off. And let's discuss a question that I think is very relevant in light of the fallout from the very tragic assassination of Charlie Kirk. Granted, I'll just say here, I was aware of him. I didn't agree with him on everything, but I did respect his talents. And the fact that he was willing to change his mind on things, and keep studying and all that. And I did not. I know I was in a state of shock when I heard that he was gunned down. But the fallout from it seems to be reinforcing in the minds of a lot of people that you can't really stick. There's at least two ideological sides here that are not meshable where this is concerned. And I have my own thoughts on that, but I'm going to hold off on that for the moment. Those come up over the course of our conversation. But it's led to this question that I felt that would be a good one to kick the Tavern Roundtable off with now in light of what's going on. And this question is a united America now unsalvageable? All right. That's, I think, is a big question that needs to be addressed now. And it needs to be discussed and needs to be seeded into the information battlefield, if that's what we can call this. So let's go to Jason first on this question. So give us your initial thoughts on this question. Is a united America now unsalvageable, especially in light of the fallout of what happened?
I would say that a united America has been unsalvageable for a while. So this terrible incident, to see it played over and over again on the internet within minutes, it's terrible. But it's even beyond rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic to me. It's like standing on the top of the flagpole of the Titanic waving. Like it is terrible. It is bad. It is a step in the wrong direction for politics when violence invades like that, especially somebody who, again, whether you agree with him or not, it's hard to disagree that his approach was at least rational. His activity was, hey, why don't we talk about this? See if you can convince me. I'll see if I can convince you. Granted, a lot of people didn't like the positions he came to, but that's a pretty dadgum benign way to approach life is, hey, what if we talked about this? And then that's the guy that got killed. So to me, I've been arguing for a while now that the social divides and the political, I want to say constipation, where stuff just doesn't flow, the political backup or political backlog or dysfunction, this is a symptom of that. It might be a tipping point. It might be, the final straw on the camel or whatever, but that's my take. Is that Charlie Kirk, as terrible as that is, is unfortunately just another bad thing in a long list of bad things.
I think that what we've seen since the assassination, at first I was a little bit looking at the glass half full. I mean, the people who supported Charlie Kirk weren't burning buildings down. There wasn't, at least as of this moment, another act of killing in retribution. And so these are good things. However, when it comes to the where the country is at, I think this has shown me that when something tests us, we become even more hyper polarized. The left, the progressives, what have you, are putting out a narrative that the assassin was a right winger, an extreme right winger, so right wing that he hated Charlie Kirk, and of course the right is pointing out that the assassin was a roommate and in love with the trans person, and therefore it fits into that narrative. And so there's this hyperpolarization, not only in the two sides choosing sides, but in the narrative that they each place. And then what I find doubly concerning is that the right, which has been the bastion of free speech, at least for the last couple of decades, is now clamping down on free speech. And so now I'm kind of in my head freaking out, because we've got two sides completely disparate, nothing in common, no hope of unity, polarized. And I'm afraid that do I belong to either one? Because I believe in free speech. So that's not part of your question, but I would say this is starting to point to me that I have less hope than I had before of finding common ground, of finding unity. I'll just toss out that to whatever degree Marjorie Taylor Greene is serious in posting once again, calling for national divorce, I'm having the same sentiments.
Yeah, no, I a lot of what you both said resonate with me. And I mean, I'm going to throw in the thought process that I've had for a while. And that was, let's put it this way. I did not anticipate the events as they exactly unfolded, but I expected that something like this was going to happen. Maybe not an assassination, but something that would really hype up the polarization and the divide. I expected that to happen for these reasons, and I'll just lay out how I came to this. First of all, there was an episode I listened to of the Tom Woods Show a couple of years ago, where Tom Woods and Paul Gottfried, the head of Chronicles magazine, retired academic, had a conversation. And Paul Gottfried hails from the Pat Buchanan right, I guess is what you might call it. And Woods and Gottfried came to a very insightful conclusion, I thought, which was that they realized that there is no spectrum in politics where these two sides are concerned. You are on the left or you're not. You are on the right or you're not. All right. And now they did not exactly take this to the end that I did, but I was so intrigued by that premise that I studied it further. And I realized that there was truth to it, because if you look at it, boil down to the two sides, what their ultimate, shall we say, what their ultimate beliefs are grounded in. All right. And the left believes that the state is God, basically. The right does not. All right. And, the right believes in, that there's, for the most part, that there's a creator of some kind, or there's some kind of order to it, there's some kind of force behind it that, drives things. Whereas the left doesn't believe that at all. The left is entirely based in the world. And so when you look at that and you see how it grows out of that, you see that you can't have a spectrum where that's concerned, okay? Because the roots of the two worldviews are completely incompatible. And so what you're ending up with here is that, yeah, you may share some basic ideas, but the root of your beliefs are not compatible. And so therefore you can't be combined under one structure as a result. All right. And again, like I said, this was how I came to it. This was the thought process that I had. And that was the first thing that came to my mind. And I think that was one of the things that really began to really soften me up on the idea of national divorce and secession, was that it was like, well, if the worldviews are that incompatible, then nothing productive can be gained by forcing them under the same roof in the end. Okay, nothing productive can be gained. then the second part to my feeling about this, I mean, and this began really kicking in as I saw the fallout from from Kirk's death, was a fear that I'd had for a long time, and I know I was voicing it prior to the 2024 election, and I think in the immediate aftermath of it, which I said, look, I said, power corrupts, and people who get that power are going, it's like if they have the right buttons pushed, they're going to go just hog wild. All right. And so I feared that, I mean, I hoped I was wrong, but I feared that either Trump or people in his administration were going to take precedents set by both the Biden and Obama administrations, not to mention the Bush administration and Clinton, and we're just going to start. They were going to use it when the opportunity presented itself to start doing crackdowns. So let's just put it this way. When Attorney General Pam Bondi came out and started talking about hate speech, sad to say, it didn't surprise me. I was like, I kind of expected that was going to happen at some point. It's like, because they have the power. The power corrupts their minds. They like exercising it. They see a problem and they're like, well, I can use this bully pulpit to enforce it. And that to me further enforced the idea that national divorce was necessary, because I was like, this power shouldn't exist in the first place. All right, because that's what's going to happen no matter what ideology you are. I mean, I like to call it the totalitarian left and the authoritarian right, because they approach it differently. But at the same time,
but they still both just want to be in charge. Yeah.
So again, that was where I came to with this, is that basic. And I think I'm going to end with this part before I turn it back to you gentlemen to pick up your own thoughts. And I know I voiced this on Twitter not long after when I started seeing the fallout. I said, I have a real fear in this country right now that Kirk's death and the fallout from it has the potential to do to America what John Brown's raid did to America in 1859. I really fear that might happen. I hope it doesn't, but I fear that it might. And I fear that there are people behind the scenes, like power string pullers behind the scenes, who might want that to happen, and they might be trying to gin up all this conflict and all this hatred and stuff like that. So that's the other fear that I have in terms of everything that unfolded where that was concerned. So I'm going to throw it back to you gentlemen. Again, let's go with Jason and then we'll go to Rick, but do your follow-up on that and your thoughts.
So if we think about national divorce, there's two good points there that I like. Number one, we understand what a divorce is. It's the dissolution of a union, of a marriage, but there is no national marriage, right? So there was no time when I stood up and said, I picked that one, man. She's pretty hot. Let's hang out for the rest of our lives together, right? About the government, right? It doesn't happen that way. We were born here, most of us. Some of us came here, right? But it might have been for the government, I guess, but it probably was for economic reasons or to get away from something else, right? There's no till death do us part with the federal structure, number one. So when we say divorce, guys, that doesn't mean, we're committing adultery on the, no. All those pieces about marriage don't apply. But the other angle I like here is to say that, we understand a few things about divorce just from society. We understand that there are ways that couples can grow apart prior to final dissolution, right? I joke about it like we're already sleeping in separate bedrooms, running separate bank accounts, right? I mean, if the United States and the people was a marriage, which it's not, but if it was, we would be at that point already. We're already at the point where we don't even like each other. We're barely roommates. Things are not good. We're not serving each other's interests or needs. We're still crammed in the same house and tied by some union, right? But the marriage is already dysfunctional. So when you get to that point, what are your options? One of the things, Grant, you've mentioned a few times about violence. I mean, I am scared that if one party says, I would like to leave now, the other side will beat them up instead of letting them go. Right. I mean, that's what happened in the 1860s. The threat of violence to maintain this union is real and still going to be present. I mean, all you have to do is look at Joe Biden. Oh, you don't need AR-15s. You need F-15s, right? I mean, that's the president of the United States. Granted, it's a joke made off a bad pun, but whatever. The point still holds. But we know that in a divorce, there's no expectation that you kill the lady Right. In fact, it's the opposite. You're not really allowed to beat that person up because that's against the law. You're not allowed to kill that person because your relationship has fallen apart. Right. That's one reason I like national divorce as a metaphor, because there's no expectation of violence at all. We understand what it means to say, man, this sucks. Sucks for you, sucks for me. Let's go our separate ways. And I think that's probably the point that we're at. I'll hand off to Rick.
Yeah, one of the thoughts that occurred to me is how the reason or one manner in which we've become hyperpolarized, where there's such little overlap, is because of our willingness or complicity to get into that mindset that those that we disagree with are less than us, are not even human. They certainly don't deserve respect. They don't deserve our time. And what's dangerous about that, of course, is it makes it easy then to commit violence because they aren't human. In fact, if they're evil, perhaps we're doing good by committing violence on them. But if I was to try and make lemonade out of those lemons, I guess, it would seem that national divorce is a greater possibility when you have these two philosophical poles viewing each other that way. They may be more likely to say, yes, get out of here. If a state wants to secede, they'll say, yes, we don't want you. Get out, whether the leaving state is red or blue, or perhaps, whether it's groups of states. But the bottom line is, rather than thinking that, hey, we just have a difference of opinion, it would be much more likely that you'd be resistant to say, let's break up the union and just resolve our differences. If you view the other as less than human and actually evil, then you would want to shed them. And the best way to shed them is to separate.
That would be my hope. And I know that there has been, and I will say this, granted, my exposure is limited here, but my understanding is that there has been some pushback on the whole idea of because I know there are some people who've come out and said it's like, not only can we not live with these people must be punished, and that's coming from both left and right. But I've also seen pushback against that, where people have said, it's like, yeah, I don't want to live in the same place with these people, but I abhor violence as well. And those voices do seem to finally be, we mentioned Marjorie Taylor Greene. It was like, I think that was a big part of the pushback against that. I know Thomas Massey also pushed back against some of that, saying it's like, hey, I don't like what these people are doing any more than you do. Is like, but that doesn't give us the excuse to use some of the language we're using. That people who are normally aligned with me are using. It was like, that's not good here. So, but kind of getting to the bigger point here is that I do believe that what America has realized at this point, and I'm talking about the American people in general, I think they have realized that basically the way things are can no longer continue. That we can't continue in this status where it's like where they got two of these factions fighting like cats and dogs and going politically and going off like this. Is like, we can't think that I think that's been the biggest change that's come out in the aftermath of Kirk's assassination, is that people have just realized that this is not tenable. And I'd like your guys' feedback on this. Actually, I think what we're going to be going into now for the next couple of months, at least, is there's going to be this debate, I think, between conflict or just separation. I think that's going to be a real debate that's going to come up over the next several months, especially in the more in like the alternative media circles, podcast circles, and maybe even among the general population now. But I'd like your guys' feedback on that. So yeah, Jason, let's start with you on that one. What do you think?
Yeah, so I don't know what the next few months holds, because I'm skeptical about everything, but I'm skeptical that the official narrative rings a little hollow.
Yes.
Okay. So I said earlier on X that, if you think that the 9/11 story or the Vegas shooting story or the Trump assassination story or the Charlie Kirk story, if you think those sound a little funny, just imagine what they did to history. Right. I mean, every one of those stories, I don't want to be all like, it must be the government doing this. I don't want to place blame on some conspiracy, but I also don't believe the official narrative. It's too hollow. So that's one point. It only takes one bad guy. You can say what you want about these guys being prepped somehow or whatever. I don't have any proof of that whatsoever. But I do know that one more crazy guy could ratchet everything up another notch, and 10 more crazy guys could ratchet it up another notch back and forth. And then, that's what's one of the things that scares me, is that it's not in our control. It's in the control of the worst parts of our population, which is why some of us are getting out ahead of it and saying, hey, let's do a political solution to this before I don't know what pejorative word you like, before all the rednecks get involved or something, right? Let's do it. Let's do it in a way where, the reasonable people are still in charge. So I think I want to pivot just a little. We've defined the problem. I think all of us see the problem. It's easy to sell that there's a problem. But Rick asked me the other night, like, if the magic question from counseling, so like, if you woke up and everything was magically perfect, what would it look like, and how did you get there? Right? Um, you know, Divorce is hard. We've used that metaphor. I don't think anybody gets married and says, "Man, I hope I get divorced later. That'll be awesome." Right? The idea is that that's bad. And so when I talk about national divorce, I've heard people say, "Well, we don't need a divorce. We need a marriage counselor." Okay, cool. What does that look like? Who's that guy? Failing relationship between two people or whatever. You have this neutral third party with some education and experience that kind of helps the two parties sort out their differences, treat each other respectfully, not resort to violence, maybe uses a little bit of scientific technique to push them back towards each other, right? There is no such national marriage counselor, because we're talking about millions of people on each side with whole political apparatuses feeding that. Well, you could argue who feeds who, but the polarization is across multiple levels. So I can't conceive of what kind of qualifications, what kind of person or entity could step in the middle of that and be the marriage counselor, the marriage mediator, right? Like, well, it couldn't be a person, probably. Yes, in theory it could, but I've never seen that person. It'd have to be somebody we haven't seen on the political stage yet. They can step into the middle and say, "Y'all are full of crap, and so are y'all. Now let's knock it off. Let's figure this out." Right? Nobody gets in power with that approach. It's always either the strong man on one side or the strong man on the other. So could you look to international, maybe? Like, we have pretended like we mediate between countries in international conflicts all the time. We're in the middle of Ukraine, or talking to Ukraine and Russia both, trying to somehow broker a deal. Like, is there somebody on the international stage that can step up and say, "All you Americans are being silly. Let me help you talk yourself through that." Right? Like, I don't see that. I don't see an external diplomatic presence solving that. So, I mean, what do you see, Rick? What do you see as potential ways forward, given that the problem is what it is?
Well, I think within your question is, a way forward means a way to resolution or unity or something of that nature, or at least directing away from conflict. I don't
Mhm.
I don't actually I don't see one. I mean, the best way forward without conflict is to get people to actually entertain national divorce. I've said before, possibly with each of you, but I've said many times, I believe the absolute best potential outcome would be a true federal system. The
Mhm.
United States of America is still 50 states, but they're sovereign states, and the federal government is extraordinarily limited, much closer to what the anti-federalists wanted back in the founding days. I don't see how we get there. I really don't see a viable path. I mean, it's like the likelihood of that is like winning the lottery last week or so with $1.5 billion. It's not going to happen. So we can keep wishing. And so if that isn't going to happen, then we either have the temperature continuing to rise and have some type of conflict, or we have some political solution, a national divorce. What would intervene in those two possible outcomes? I suppose getting us into an active war, that would unify the country. If
And
North
man,
Korea,
they're trying that. Man,
they
they're
are
trying
trying.
that.
If
It's
North Korea drops a nuclear bomb within the geographic confines of the United States, that would unite us, for maybe a decade.
Maybe.
So yeah, so I don't see. That's why I'm with my VDF podcast. I think it's so important, and what you guys are doing is so important because it's probably not so much that we're eager to have national divorce, but we're eager to avoid violence and we're eager to avoid civil war. And likely the best way to do that is to talk about national divorce. I was going to mention to the professor's question what the future looked like for the next couple of months. I think it was, in my mind, I think that the left is going to continue to get swirled up, and they're going to call for secession and national divorce, and they have been calling for they've been calling for soft secession, which is just interposition, nullification, and so forth. And I don't think most of them have even worked it out, knowing that the state can't be an intermediary with income tax dollars from the individual to the federal government. But at any rate, they're talking about it, and what the federal government is doing by stifling free speech, by having their icons like Jimmy Kimmel be dismissed. They're going to get further and further enraged. They're going to be further demanding separation. And so maybe that's going to hasten things. On the other hand, as simple as human beings are, since the left is going to be calling for separation, is the right going to be adamantly opposed to it because it's the opposite of what the left wants, right? Until a Democrat president gets in again, and then we'll flip again. But this I think will continue to increase in its intensity. It certainly did with Charlie's assassination. I don't think we've seen the peak of that. And the question is, does that peak eventually cool down, or does it get to a certain point and then whoops, there's another thing, and then there's another thing? That'll remain to be seen.
Yeah, no, I there's a lot to take from what you both said there that I can agree with. Although I want to quickly touch on some things Jason said. It's like you talk about two sides going in for marriage counseling. It's like, how can you do marriage counseling when the two sides don't even believe in the most fundamental things at the base? The root of their beliefs are not compatible. How do you counsel that out? I don't see it.
Well, okay, from a counseling background, I mean, I'm kind of a psychologist. I'm not a counselor, but the answer would be if you're the neutral party in the middle and you figure out, man, these two guys really hate each other right now, maybe back together is not even an option. The neutral party, then the middle, the mediator, figures out, okay, well, let's go our separate ways. What does that look like so we don't kill each other, right? Who wants the dog? Why do you want the dog? Why is the dog important to you? Who wants the cat? Why is the cat important to you? What are we going to do about the kids? I mean, the party in the middle kind of facilitates the undoing of the relationship. And that, from a counseling perspective, is as valid as trying to get them back together, because the counselor's job is to help the people get what's best for them. That's why they pay you for help. They don't pay you for an outcome. They don't pay you for one side to the other to win. At least that's my understanding of the counseling industry. Sorry, I took it back over.
No, that's completely valid. I'm glad you brought that up, because it's like that. You just proved my point. Is that, and this is something I've said for a long time. It's basically like separation is a form of, what's it called? Dude, I just had a brain blank.
It is a resolution. I mean, Rick was saying, what's the resolution going to be? And going away is a resolution.
Yeah,
so it would be coming back together.
Right. It's like conflict. Separation is a form of conflict resolution. That's what I was looking for. Thank you. Thank you. That's what I was trying to get at. Is that that's a form of conflict resolution. I mean, even as a kid, I was taught that. Is like, it's like, if you're not getting along with this guy, walk away. Okay, walk away. Right.
They say.
And the only thing that but on the other hand, something else you said, Jason, you talked about some kind of mediator, international mediator. That's one thing that I don't see anybody who could fill that role, because if you look at it, I don't want to go off on a huge tangent here, but this polarization we're seeing is not restricted to the United States, unfortunately.
Fair point.
We're seeing this all over the world right now, in multiple nations. That's one of the reasons why I know an article I wrote last year, I said we're heading into the era of secession worldwide, because we're seeing it all over the world. All right. And he's like, they're kind of in dormant stage now. Now that Russia's at war, but even Russia has areas that can't stand Moscow. Okay. It's like, I
think there's going to be a civil war in England and in France, if not more countries, within the next 2-3 years.
fear that that's the case. I mean, and there's some African nations too, South Africa, Nigeria, Equatorial Guinea. It's like there's a lot of places where you're seeing stuff like this. So I look at this, I say there is no international mediator here. It's like in my mind, at least, I don't see one.
This,
It's like,
I agree with you, but I had a thought run through.
Okay,
Chase
go
this
ahead.
rabbit with me and see if I'm crazy. So the French protest better than we do. Like when the French people get mad, like there's a jillion of them in the streets on tractors, disrupting everything. And the government's like, we can't have that. And they give them what they want, right? We don't have that in America. We either burn stuff down altogether or we have prayer vigils, and none of it ever moves the needle, right? But if it did, regardless of which political side you're on, I could envision a scenario where, okay, say the French people start fighting each other and one side's being mean to the other one. It's an unfair fight, or it's an irrational fight, or somebody's disproportionately violent. I could see the international community at large, the UN, maybe not the United States specifically, but the European Union. I could see somebody coming in and saying, hey, you can't treat them like that. They may not try to resolve the conflict, but they may step in and say, nah, that kind of violence isn't the way we play this game. Okay. I could see that. So if the United States went from polarization to competing violence, Lord, I hope it doesn't. But if it did, and then the state got involved on one side or the other of that, and perpetuated that violence further, I could see maybe some international pressure to not do it that way. Kind of like Russia's getting pressure to not invade Ukraine, regardless of who's right or who's wrong. It's conceivable to me anyway, that there could be an international pressure to not have a civil war at the scale of a United States, for example. Hadn't thought about that before. Unpacking it may be stupid. We'll see.
It's an idea. Well, the only issue that I have, and I'll throw it to you, Rick, after I give my thoughts. The only problem I see with that is that some of those institutions you mentioned, like the United Nations and the European Union, they're crumbling apart as we speak. Nobody respects them anymore. Okay, it's like, United Nations has a little more legitimacy, but European Union, nobody respects them anymore. Not after what they did in Romania. And what they're trying to do in France now. It's like nobody respects them. It's like United Nations, they've shown themselves to be completely hapless because they can't stop the conflicts either in Eastern Europe or in Southwest Asia or in one or two other places as well. They have
and them intervening with us would kind of be like the youngest child being like, hey, Dad, you got to quit fighting like that, right? There is some of that.
Yeah, there might be. It's like, and so again, so it just, I guess what it points to me is that this is kind of where my hope is. And is like, I guess in my terms, is that because I'll probably unpack this more in a little later. The one hope that I do have sits with the fact that the people who stir up polarization the most in today's world are the ones who have the most to gain from it in some way. All right. What my hope would be is that we would have people who would step up into leadership spots when the upheaval comes. And we're going to have an upheaval of some kind, all right? It's like, what we're hoping for is that it's not a violent civil war, okay? It's like, but look around. I've been seeing the economic numbers come out. They're bad, and they're getting far worse. It's imploding quickly. And so you kind of look at that, it's like, could we potentially have people who are level-headed in their own communities who step up into leadership spots like we had at America's founding, and I'll just throw out here Texas's founding as well, where you had ordinary people who were not, they weren't internationally known or anything, but they slowly rose up to take the spots and to be what was needed in that moment. The George Washingtons, Jim Bowies, Sam Houstons, Thomas Jeffersons, and all that. It's like they all rose. So I guess one of my hopes would be is that we would see the people who benefit from polarization, they would crash and burn, and then other people would step up and say, okay, let's talk like this, like adults. It's like, okay, you guys already live over there, that's your property. Okay, you guys go do that. It's like, we're just going to be here, and we have an agreement where the river's our border, and you know what? You do your thing, we do our thing, and that's it. But I only see that coming from people who are not in leadership positions now, who then suddenly come to the top during the upheaval and then just say, okay, let's be adults about this. It's like, but let's throw it to Rick here quick, and then we'll go back to Jason, so you guys can follow up on what's being said here.
Well, you talked about, I think, what does the future look like in the sense of where can you place yourself, or how do you view yourself within this possible reality? At least that's kind of how I interpreted what you're saying. And I just wanted to go to I ran for Congress last year, and people were saying, why, you're not, what are you going to change? What can you possibly change in that swamp? And I said a couple of things. Number one, I can just show integrity and vote consistently with principle. Two, I can try and be a a megaphone of freedom and just keep talking about that, right? Something's got to work. But three is, I said, sometime in the not too distant future, there will be an implosion, federal financial implosion. And we're going to need people in place that can deal with that with a level head. Because when an implosion happens, it's very likely that we either go to a system like a smaller national divorce type of system, more freedom, or we go to a totalitarian state. And if we don't have people in place that understand that that is the bifurcation when you have some kind of economic apocalypse, then you are going to go to totalitarianism.
I think to some degree, the totalitarian outcome is unavoidable. Here's what I mean, though. We're 350 million people, and one side or the other, their totalitarian's going to win. Right now, we have a right-wing totalitarian. Sure, I don't like that guy either. But last time we had a left-wing kind of totalitarian guy. And as this thing continues to spiral out of control, and as things get more and more entrenched, I can't tell. I can't tell who's going to win. I don't know who the final worst, the big boss level totalitarian is going to be. But, if it's a right-wing guy, and California is the first one out the door, it might go one way. If it's a left-wing guy and Texas is the first one out the door, it might go another way. But there's going to be some portion that wants the totalitarian. There's going to be some portion of the dismembered union that wants it that way, that wants to keep the man in power, woman, whatever. That's what you saw kind of with the evolution of the Holy Roman Empire, right? It quit being the whole world, but then it was still a big chunk of the world for a long time. And now, centuries and centuries later, it's waxed and waned with crusades and all these things, right? But history has shown us that there's going to be still this core of the original, and I can't predict yet because I don't know what kind of totalitarian we're going to end up with. But
now, just to clarify, I think you're right. If you envision that there is a dramatic crisis of some sort, and we come out on the other side still as a national government, it's extremely likely that that national government, it will be totalitarian in some sense. I was thinking more in the sense of, if there is a true cataclysmic type event that you have to reconstitute in some manner, you could have people that are more freedom minded saying, this is the time we have to be smaller nations representing people closer to home, maintaining the culture and so forth, versus those that would say we must reconstitute the national government as it was before, except stronger, so that, it's going to take someone with a fist to prevent this from ever happening again, to lead people out of despair. We need to, put our faith in this one person. And so looking at that, not because I agree, if we come out nationally, I don't know that's going to end very well.
No, I agree with your points. I mean, I'm going to say this. I'm going to kind of play the optimist here in this particular area.
Somebody needs to.
Some people say I'm over optimistic. I don't know. I try to, because let's just say this, is that I'm seeing a lot of signs, even, and this has been a real encouragement to me, actually, that even in this age where we have, Trump back in the White House and all that, in that there's a lot of initiatives going on in state legislatures, especially in red states, where we're seeing where they're responding to the people, and the people seem to be more focused on change there. I'm seeing a lot of that going on right now. Like, for instance, I don't know if you both heard about the news in Florida, where Ron DeSantis is going to put an initiative on the ballot for Florida next year, which would abolish the property tax in Florida. And it's like, holy smoke, it's like I never would have guessed. Okay, and I mean, you can speak probably to this more than I can, probably, Jason, but I'm hearing that there's similar talk going on in Texas. It's meeting resistance, of course,
Mm-hmm.
but there's similar talk going there. And I know, Rick, you were behind efforts in North Dakota to help bring that about, and I think it still will happen at some point. And then you see, like, Wyoming state government setting up a they're setting up like this trust fund based in precious metals for the particular purpose. I believe one of those state legislators who was the sponsor of the bill said that the reason they were proposing this was because they said we need to be prepared if the dollar goes kaput. The Wyoming state government needs to prepare to continue to run in case, and that went into law. That's a law in Wyoming now. It's like, and there's other states that are also pursuing these, and so I see in a number of states that there are these initiatives going on where they're just basically like they're taking control and saying it's like we're gonna do this, and this, even if the feds are not gonna do it, we're gonna do it. And then we mentioned earlier in the conversation about Democrats doing soft secession themselves in certain areas, and now there's even talk. I mean, I know I covered this a couple of weeks ago. There's talk from like St. Louis now wants to split from Missouri. It's like, oh, okay. It's like, and that's fine. They want to go do that. So be it. So be it. In fact, I haven't finished it yet, but I've got a whole piece flowing out. It's like, hey, it's like this would be a win-win. Let downstate Illinois and St. Louis join as states, and then it's like you've got the Missouri Compromise of 2028. So it's so you get, and so there's potential there. So I have hopes. I mean, like I said, I agree with you guys that if you come out on the other side of this upheaval with a national government, yes, it's going to be at least authoritarian, if not totalitarian. All right, is like an authoritarian. I mean, like there, we could see something like a more tyrannical version of Francisco Franco's government in Spain after the Spanish Civil War. Okay, Franco was remarkably light-handed for the most part, but you can see a more tyrannical version of that for an authoritarian regime. And then totalitarian, is like, I mean, take your pick: Stalin, Mao, Khrushchev, or Pol Pot, whoever it is like So I agree with you that if we come out on the other side, national, yes, that we're looking at that kind of a future. But I personally don't think that. I think the odds of that are actually a lot lower than a lot of people think, for the reasons that I just laid out. That I'm seeing all these initiatives at the state level where where the people are just saying, you know what, let's just do this here. So like, let's do the proper thing. Go ahead.
I'd like to pivot to that too. So in Texas, we're famously just re-gerrymandered everything to make our state redder. And so in response to that, California re-gerrymandered everything to make their state bluer. Okay. And in some levels, that's bad. That's terrible politics. That's abuse of power. But I'm an optimist about this stuff. So what that means, though, is when it comes time to unravel, the actual government structures that'll be doing the negotiating will be more homogenous. Now, they may have got there in bad ways, right? But if Texas government cheats and makes itself all red, maybe we can come up with a red answer over there instead of the constant gridlock and chaos and polarization that we already have. If California cheats the system and makes their stuff all blue, they can have a blue zone over there and they can figure it out in the blue way. Right. So I'm not convinced that all of this is necessarily bad. I think that as we entrench, if we've got the right players in the middle saying, hey, y'all chill out, or why don't we go our separate ways? Texas in particular has its own gold depository. We just got a stock exchange last year, not because there's not enough of those in the world, but because we have one now in case we need it. Right. Mm-hmm. We have 12 legislators, I believe, state representatives, and one statewide office holder that have signed a Texas First Pledge to work actively towards, no, let's not worry about the good of the United States. Let's do Texas. I'm a Texas rep. Let's represent those guys, right? So, we're seeing, in my mind, some hopeful things in politics. And there are people that would catastrophize that and say we're getting more polarized. But I would say maybe the opposite, is that we're getting more homogenized so that we can come up with suitable answers on one side or the other, and quit trying to please everybody, which clearly has not worked. That's one way I see forward, maybe, is that as we homogenize, or even if it comes through, let's say, different abuses of power, as we get closer together within each farther apart group, That makes sense. So that gives each group an opportunity to start making solutions that might work.
Yep. Rick?
Well, I don't know that I've got a lot to add to that. It could very well be a greater, being more homogenous, fewer disputes, and in theory, you should be able to get more done. And if you're like-minded and you have the same cultural values, then probably most everyone's going to be happy in that scenario.
So that's what McMakin argues economically, and what's the guy's name? Buckley argues from a social perspective about smaller political groups. And again,
Mhm.
those are, to me, I've written a book, sure, but those are foundational works. Like those are academic works that set the foundation for the kind of stuff I'm saying. They've got people who have done the statistical analysis and done the social research to say, no, actually, on paper, not just in some guy's mind, smaller, more homogenous groups have more freedom. They have more satisfaction. They have more fiscal responsibility, right? There's objective advantages to that kind of a homogenous group.
Yeah, I would agree. And actually, I think that's a good segue, and probably what will be our last question to discuss here is that let's just say the best. Well, I don't think you can ever call one of these a best case scenario because of all the upheaval going on. But let's just say a better scenario. Let's say the better scenario unfolds where we have a lot of breaking up going on. This is something that I've thought about in a lot of detail here, and I know I was challenged on this by a member of my team. They said, well, how many? It's like, let's say America does break up. They're like, how many is too many? What's like, how small are we talking here? It's like, how far does this go? And I told him, I said, I'm not going to predict that. I said, because I can't, because, it's like, I don't know all the intricate details of all these different areas, and all that. But I think that there's a potential we could see something akin to, the map of America could look akin to something like you mentioned, the Holy Roman Empire. Have you ever looked at all the mini states that were inside that? It was like some of the maps of how small they got in some areas. And I know I've talked about the concept of city states,
Mm-hmm.
coming out of this city state of Chicago, city state of New York, city state of LA and San Diego. I think I talked to the person not too long ago where I said, let's have the city state of Wilmington, Philadelphia, it's like, and things like that. It's like, so I guess that would be the question I would just throw out here, just to wrap up here, is like, if splitting up really takes off as a phenomenon and really just catches fire. I know it's like some people are predicting that if it happens, that's how it's going to happen. It'll be a contagion. How far does this go? It's like, how far? I mean, like, how far might well, I guess I should say, how far might this go? It's like, in your guys' opinion. It's like, how far might this go? So, Jason, I'll start with you, and then we'll go to Rick, and then I'll give what last thoughts I have.
Okay, so one libertarian principle is that one is enough. I'm a sovereign citizen. I don't need you. I'll trade you for stuff that I need, right? So theoretically, yeah, you could argue that, but I don't like theoretical arguing. I like numbers. So I just checked. Well, that's what I was doing, looking down. There are currently 54 countries right now in Africa, right? And some of those are tiny, and some of them are poor, and some of them are corrupt, and some of them are, all kinds of bad things. Some of them are fighting still. And nobody says that none of those have the right to exist because of those conditions, right? Nobody says, Togo, you're too tiny. You can't be a country. Nobody says, Sudan, y'all can't get your crap together. You can't be a country, right? Nobody says that. The same thing would go with Europe. I didn't pull numbers, but, Luxembourg, Monaco, they are countries. They are tiny. There's nobody there of any consequence. They have nothing. And nobody says they can't be a country. Nobody says they can't exist. Nobody says they must consolidate or they must join some union. So it is only the United States that says we must take this continent and make it all one thing under one all powerful. No, that's not the way actually the entire world works except us. So I think what happens when we blow that up metaphorically, non-violently, when that falls apart. So when that falls apart, I think we end up the same place as everybody else in the rest of the world with smaller groups, and some of them will be awesome and some of them will suck terribly, just like the rest of the world, right? We will divide up into groups, and some of those groups will be more successful than others, but every single one of those groups will have the right to exist. So that's where I see it going. I don't know if it'll be 3 countries or 5 or 47 or 92 come out of the United States. I don't know. But I predict that it'll go that way, that it'll end up with, more splinters, and some of them will be small and some of them will be bigger, and just go from there.
I agree. We don't know, and it's sort of like whatever the number is going to be is going to be. If we are doing it based on voluntary association, then whatever the number is, I'm cool. I would say that if we tried to look at what's the least number, in my mind, it would probably be four. We talk a lot
Mhm.
about red, blue, and two countries, and then it becomes very odd looking. But I could say, since we're just sort of war gaming this out, I could see the states of Pacifica, and I could see the Northeast, Yankeedom, and I could see the Southeast, and then I could see the Heartland states, and maybe Texas. They just want to be alone, but nevertheless, general Heartland states. And then what you have in there, if you were to sort it out, so simple as that, you have mostly falling along the lines of the red, blue, progressive, conservative, but more importantly, you have more of a shared culture. And I
Mhm.
think
Yep.
that's going to be the key, because you can have some of the disparate political views, but if you share a culture, you're less likely to want to kill each other.
Fair.
And then, Jason, was it in your book? Did you write about consociationalism? Okay, that might have been McMakin, or I've been reading so many books on this stuff lately.
Right.
But there's the aspect of how do you deal with the blue in a very largely deep red, but you've got a blue urban center. There's
Mhm.
ways to deal with that. Could they become their own city state? Absolutely they could. But is there a way to deal with that by shared agreements and some sovereignty of city states within a state?
Mhm.
There, as Jason has pointed out, there's going to be hiccups, and you're going to figure it out. And as long as it means more freedom for the individual, you can't go wrong.
I would agree. I mean, like I might be a little more dramatic on how few I think that it could be than you are, Rick. You're saying that like four. I do it from my studies. I think it'll be nine. I don't think it'll be less than nine. Just because of I can't see California and Texas being part of coalitions. And then you look into some of the other ones. I mean, I think I brought this up when you and I, when I was on your show, Rick, that I said, it's like even amongst areas that vote the same way politically, like nationally,
Mhm.
they all voted for Trump or whatever. There are significant differences. I mean, like the old South, Southeast, they got very, very little in common with the Great Plains. And even in areas where you don't expect a lot of differences, like the Midwestern states, like Ohio, Indiana, downstate Illinois, and so on, they're very different from Nebraska, Kansas, Montana, Wyoming. And then you got Arizona and Utah, very different from Idaho, Montana, and so on. So I look at it as like we're going to have at least. I think we're going to have at least nine. So at the least. I mean, again, it's impossible to predict for sure, but I mean, like I think, but it could be far more than that.
So here's
So
a fun take that Daniel Miller likes, is that why would you leave a relationship just to get back in one, right? So is the outcome of national divorce going to be like some rebound chick and we're going to expect that works out, right? Right. So there has to be some period of consolidation of I've got to get my crap together over here before I run off with build another country with some other lady. I mean, again, I'm using silly metaphors, but there's a little piece of truth in there, right? That
no,
we may not
you
want to jump. You know, I bring this up when people say, well, y'all just want the Confederacy back. Nah, not really. We don't want to jump back into another relationship right after this failed one, do we? I mean, society history, everybody knows that doesn't work, right? From a marriage standpoint.
Definitely, I get your point. I'm going to push back just a little bit,
Yeah.
because if we take my premise that the most ideal outcome would be if we could go to a true federal system, if
yeah,
that's the case, then there is merit in the idea that you have sovereign states working together in a true representative federal system. And we've learned significant lessons about what to do and not do over the last 249 years. And
mhm.
and I could see, Texas, you bet. I mean, I get it. There's a whole big history, there's a whole big culture, not to mention it's just a whole big state. You don't need anyone. And frankly, none of the states need anyone as long as there's free trade.
Right.
But I
Yep.
could see that, say, North Dakota, Montana, Wyoming, South Dakota, to say, you know what, we are so similar. let's make a little federal system here. Maybe there's some strength in that. Just
Hmm.
mild pushback to say that going back into a marriage, it's possible that you just found a really good gal and you learned some things about yourself to be a better husband, and
Hmm.
maybe it's okay to get back in a marriage.
Maybe, or at least, when you go through that, you know better than to run off with the rebound chick, but you still surround yourself with good people, with friends, with helpers, with people that are interested in your well being, right? I think
Yeah,
that piece of the metaphor holds too. Like if we rush to get back into some huge non federal system or some authoritarian or totalitarian system just to have another girlfriend, right? That's
sure,
not a good outcome.
sure.
Now, if we surround ourselves with people that want us to be better and we help each other out with what we've got, yeah, that's the way forward from a standpoint of society and within this metaphor.
Yeah, no, I would agree, and I'm gonna take a little bit of what you both said there, in that I think that I personally think that there is going to be a stage for a while here where the states, they're going to assert their sovereignty. We're already, like I said, a lot of the examples I just gave, we're already seeing it. Okay, they're already starting to. It's just going to be that they're, and I think, and I do agree with Jason that I think that there's going to be a period, taking into account that we don't know how long that period is going to be, but there is going to be a period where they're going to say, let's get our house in order. It's like, and figure out who we are, what we want. It's like what the people, basically who we are, and so on. They're going to do that first, but then again, it's like, but to get to Rick's point, I think once that's been done, and that could happen really quickly. For some states, it could happen very quickly where they get their house in
Hmm.
order very, very quickly.
They could.
And then I think there is going to be talk amongst different states, basically saying is like, well, should we join a federation, or are we better off just being independent and just having some streamlined agreements like trade and defense,
Hmm.
and stuff like that. I think that will be those conversations. I think will start, basically when the states are ready, when certain states are ready. And let's not forget, uh, I think also what you're going to see come out of this, regardless, is I think there are going to be a lot of new states that come out of this, taking into account like, well, Greater Idaho and downstate Illinois, El Dorado State, the California counties that have been mentioned, El Dorado, Jefferson, and
Hmm.
San Bernardino, New California. I mean, I'm expecting Texas to grow actually, because Southeast Colorado and Eastern New Mexico are both, those
Very
counties
much
are
more
both,
like us. Yep.
and
That's
they're
right.
talking like they want to join them. It's like, so
Yep.
it's like, so there's, so I mean, so I think that this is what makes it so hard to predict what the final boundaries are going to be. I think you can only do a general like forecast, of which is what I think is where we're at right now with America, is that you can just look at America's trajectory and say, we're going to go through this upheaval of some kind, and there's going to be a lot of confusion, but we're going to try and keep it as peaceful as we can. A lot of us, that's why the three of us do what we do, where
Yep.
we talk about, let's keep this peaceful and let's just sort out, who goes where. It's like, and let's try and keep it that way.
Hmm.
It's like, there are going to be bad actors, who try to influence things other ways, and we got to be careful of that. But I don't think this is going to be long term. It's going to be a negative. It's going to be confusing. It's not going to be easy. There are going to be difficulties we're going to have to work through, but it's going to be a long-term benefit, I think, not only for America, but I think for a lot of the world. I mean, one of the things that I forget which founder said this, I heard somebody reference it just recently. I think it was George Washington, actually, who said that America's purpose is not to enforce its ideas on everybody else, rather it's to be the example for everybody else. Okay. And he's like, and that was why he said he didn't want the military getting into foreign affairs and stuff like that. And a lot of the founding fathers and people who immediately followed them believe that. Okay, John Quincy Adams, is like, we don't go abroad looking for monsters to destroy. Okay, and I think that America has the American people, or I should say, the people in America have the chance to set that example again.
Hmm.
Is if we can keep this as peaceful as possible. But there are a lot of unknowns here. The power brokers are not going to go down willingly, I don't think. And I think what violence we have will be the result of that. The power brokers basically trying to, derail things or hang on to their power or whatever it is. But I think I think so that's what we got to watch out for. But I think in closing, and I'll give both of you a last word on this after I say my piece here. I think that I kind of tend to lean towards Jason's way, as he said at the beginning of the show, that this was always unsalvageable. But I think the realization that it's unsalvageable has now, I think it's hit a substantial portion of America, if not a majority of Americans at this point. So that's my last word. I'll let both of you finish with your last word here. Jason, we'll start with you.
I think I'll let my last word be that if you fight fire with fire, there's a lot more fire. Right. So more people get burned when you fight fire with fire. I would challenge you to think of what you could do with an AR-15 that would make a difference in the trajectory of 350 million people in the United States. Going out to buy another gun is not going to make a difference. The thing that makes a difference is honestly, I hope folks like us who are willing to stand in the middle and say, no, let's rational, let's figure this out with reasonableness and logic, and not kill each other in the process. So that's where I want to land, is that the likelihood of the peaceful outcome increases when each of us makes daily choices that lead more towards peace.
Absolutely. I guess my final thought would be that I think some of these things are inevitable, or that we as individuals have little to no control over them. So it's really a matter of keeping your own house in order. And as much as you were saying, one of the founding fathers indicated that the United States should be an example, I think really the only thing we can control is ourselves, or that we should control is ourselves. And so we should stand as individual examples of liberty and how to conduct ourselves. And in the same vein, we should, if we are examples of people who are rational and are willing to talk about conflict resolution instead of name calling or shying away or sticking your head in the sand, then you're going to be part of the solution instead of part of the problem.
I agree. Well said. Very well said. So, well, folks, thank you for joining us. And this was a fun conversation. I know we will have many more to come, guys, as things unfold. So, but I leave our audience with this, as we always end every episode. Remember, folks, the solutions to today's problems always begin with the choices you make in your own lives and in your own communities. So until next time, we're signing off from the Tavern Roundtable. Take care, folks.